Okay, hey everyone, it's Funk Roberts from funkmma.com and mmaontario.ca. I'm proud and I'm happy to be sitting here with Jonathan Chaimberg. You guys know him as strength and conditioning coach for George St. Pierre, but as far as I'm concerned, he is the best strength and conditioning coach in the UFC. So we're going to ask him some questions. He's going to give you a little lowdown on what it's like with strength and conditioning for an MMA athlete. But listen up, guys, because everything that I preach to you is based on a lot of things that Jonathan has brought to the table. So thanks a lot for doing this, Jonathan.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So right off the bat, just why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your background and you know, what got you into MMA as a coach and yeah, go for it.
I got into to wrestling, freestyle wrestling, when I was in high school, and I just fell in love with the sport. I gave up basically all the other sports around me to focus on that, and I excelled in it pretty quickly, and was a member of the national team for a bit. Victor Zilberman was a coach, and it was just a pleasure. Worked with some great guys, and through that, obviously my career in that didn't take off. I had a lot of injuries, a lot of concussions, and I stopped, but I continued training. When I was done, I educated myself and started training guys in the national team.
Right.
GSP being one of them, who's probably the greatest Canadian wrestler of all time. And through there, sort of mingled in with the Canadian Olympic team, and then obviously George St. Pierre came in,
Yeah.
David Oiseau, Rashad Evans, some of those guys started coming through Jackson's, and it just took off from there.
Wow. So you said wrestling, and I got a lot of younger guys out there. How old were you when you started wrestling, and then took that leap to to the national team?
I actually started really late. I actually started too late. I started when I was 17.
Wow.
And when you start that late in Canada, you're just, there's very little chance. So you want to start off pretty young when you wrestle, because you could go to Russia and you're wrestling against kids who have wrestled when they were 2 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
So luckily it took off, and I had good training partners, and I was a decent enough athlete that I performed well, and I was lucky. But again, I trained my ass off. I was training 3 times a day, and I just got injured, burnt out. So I would hope that guys would get in and girls would get in at a younger age and train properly, and it'll advance a lot quicker for them.
For sure. Well, there you go, guys. It's a big thing. In terms of who you've trained, so you threw out some names, but why don't you tell some of these the guys some of the names that you've trained and some of the big UFC fighters you've trained for their fights?
Well, everybody knows Rashad Evans, George St. Pierre, 2 world champions. Nate Marquart was one of the first guys I trained after his loss to Silva. Kenny Florian now is at the gym. Rory Mcdonald. Keith Jardine. The list goes on and on. I don't want to leave anybody out. On this card alone, we have probably 5 guys. So, but I really enjoyed training Russell Martin from the New York Yankees. He came in, and I'm so proud of him, the way he's performed off of 2 injuries. He's having the start of the season of his life, and he's really a guy who came in 2 times a day religiously, and he's really one of the guys I'm most proud of. Yeah,
and out of all those UFC fighters, who do you like training the most? Like, who trains the hardest? Well, first of all, who do you like training the most?
For a short period of time, I would say Russ, because a lot of these UFC guys, you'll train them. It's scattered. You'll train them, 2 times a week, 3 times a week max. You'll see them a lot because they're always with you. But it's tough to manage their schedule based on how many times a week they're wrestling, they're doing their Muay Thai, they're doing their grappling, they're doing their sparring, boxing. With Russ, he was there once, twice a day, every day.
Right.
So it was fun to see his progress. I would say guys that you would know of early on, training Nathan Marquart was fun.
Yeah.
Great athlete. George, everybody knows George. The amount he progressed in a short period of time was tremendous. So it's fun when guys can do athletic movements, hurdles, stuff that normal people don't do. Plyos, Olympic lifts.
There you go, guys. Listen up. Listen.
Fun stuff. So they're one of the guys. Rory Mcdonald, Mike Ricci are 2 of the guys I really like training now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
wow,
those guys.
That's great. Okay, so let's move to the strength and conditioning portion. So, how do you define strength and conditioning?
Strength and conditioning, I mean, it's strength and conditioning. It's a mixture, but a lot of people leave out power. A lot of people don't have a great idea of program design, so you always want to warm up properly, dynamic warm up, activate. We're talking about doing your power, meaning plyos, some form of Olympic lift, make sure you're doing your plyos, your Olympic lifts. Even if you don't have proper form, you're not able to do a clean or a snatch, there's different variations you can work on to work up to being able to do those lifts, whether it be a jump squat with weights, kettlebells. If you're really not great at Olympic lifting, one arm snatch, you can progress all the way up. And then you go into your strength work. So we pull, we push, hip and knee dominant. So heavy chin ups, heavy inverted rows, heavy lunges, heavy single leg squats, heavy trap bar deadlift, stuff of that nature. Working the core, and then you go into your conditioning. So we're very high intensity base. So sprints, sled work, acyclical circuits. Tons of stuff to mimic fights and that high intensity work.
No, that's great. That's great. I love it. I love it. So how important? So when it comes to an MMA athlete, everyone's progressing quickly and getting better technique. How important do you think the strength and conditioning portion of that for an MMA athlete is?
It separates, when you have guys with equal talent or similar talent, that's what separates regular athletes from the elite guys who can maintain their energy and their skill for 3 rounds. BJ Penn's a perfect example, one of the most skilled guys in the history of MMA. But if you gas after the first round, you get taken advantage of. So you can put BJ against a guy who can withstand his barrage for the first round, and if he gasses out, you're making a guy with lesser ability look better than you.
Totally.
So that's sort of the mentality. A guy like George, can go hard for 5 rounds actually. So 5 rounds, that's the basis of what you want to attain.
Right. Wow. I actually, one of the questions I ask a lot of people, a lot of fighters is, would you rather fight a guy who's a little better skilled but less conditioned, or would you rather fight a guy who's not as great skill but more conditioned? And I get a variety, but I think if I was more conditioned, I'd rather fight the guy who's has less condition but a little bit better skill, because again, you can fight him and.
Well, I used to be the way I used to wrestle. That I used to basically brand myself after the American wrestler, the Brands brothers.
Right.
Who basically were non-stop. They were like a Dan Gable kind of wrestler, very gritty, very gritty. Less skilled than the Russians and the Iranians, but just would break you down and mentally break you down, physically break you down, and then score their points when you were tired.
Guys, so listen up. Conditioning is so important. That's huge. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
Even George St. Pierre, who states that he doesn't do conditioning, does more conditioning than everybody.
There you go.
Yeah, he just conditions a different way. He'll even tell you conditioning is the base.
Yeah. So you touched a little bit on push-pulling and some of the things that you guys do. But one of the questions I had was, what are your 5 top ingredients to a good strength and conditioning program? Things that you need, five things that you would, top 5 things anyway.
Okay, you have to have power.
Yeah.
So power meaning plyos, Olympic lifts. You have to have your pulls, your pushes, your hip and knee dominance. We'll call that strength work,
right.
but compound movements. So we're talking about bang for your buck. So no bicep curls, no calf raises, no tricep press downs. We don't do that kind of stuff. So core work, meaning either explosive, whether it be med ball work, or anti-rotary work, where it be a Palloff press or anti-rotation. And then you're looking at conditioning, so sled work, a lot of anaerobic stuff, and those are the keys. You can find obviously some different points in there, but that's the basis of what we use.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's I agree 100%. So that's a great segue into the next question in regards to weight training versus strength conditioning for the MMA athlete.